In this video, we're going to figure out what this dashed line is, what this M means, and in Flight Sim 2020, the FMCs and GPSs don't have missed approach procedures, but can we still do missed approach procedures? And the answer is yes, in most cases, and I'm going to show you how to do that. But there are some cases where we can't do them, and I'll show you that too. So what is a missed approach procedure? An instrument approach takes us to a runway, but if we get to that runway and we can't see the runway at minimums, the missed approach procedure will take us away from the runway to a safe altitude and to a holding point most of the time. And from there, that puts us in a location where we can decide what we want to do next. They also cut down on radio congestion. If you do an approach, you go missed, you know exactly where you're going. The controller doesn't even have to tell you. You automatically know what you need to do because it's on the chart. So I'm going to go over a few approach plates and go over the missed approach procedures, and then we're going to actually fly a couple missed approach procedures. But not only will we go over the missed approach procedure, but I'll show you how to set it up as well. There's a section on the approach plate labeled missed approach. But before that, we need to figure out what is the missed approach point and how do we identify it. In the intro I said, what is this little M and what does it mean? And that is our missed approach point. On this non-precision approach, we have two ways to identify the missed approach point. And this is a non-precision approach because it does not have a glide slope. We have two ways to identify the missed approach point on this approach. One of those ways is with DME. At 1.2 DME off the localizer, which this localizer has DME, we know to go missed approach. But what if we don't have DME? That's fine. We have this chart down here. We can still identify the missed approach point, but it's just not as accurate. So for example, if our ground speed was 90 knots, we would time from the final approach fix for 2 minutes 28 seconds. When we hit 2 minutes 28 seconds, we would execute the missed approach procedure. And that procedure is up here under the missed approach section. And that procedure is climb to 3,100 feet on a heading of 249 and outbound on the Briggs VOR 322 radial to Ritz intersection 21.2 DME and hold. And that sounds like a lot, but I assure you it is not. Luckily, we have a picture of it to help fill in the pieces. We can see that we're flying a 249 degree heading until we hit the 322 degree radial off of Briggs VOR. Once we hit that, we're going to follow it until the DME says 21.2. And some people are probably asking, if we just said we're going to identify the missed approach point by time because we don't have DME, how are we going to identify that 21.2 DME distance at Ritz intersection? And the answer is, we're not going to do that by DME. We would do that off of a cross radial, the 260 radial off of ACO or Akron VOR. So this seems like a lot, but it's not. I will demonstrate this momentarily. But first I want to go over a couple more missed approach procedures. This approach is the ILS to runway 6 in St. Louis, Missouri. And as you may or may not know, ILS approaches are precision approaches, meaning they have a localizer and they have a glide slope for vertical guidance. On a precision approach, we go missed at the decision height, which in this case is 751 feet. We don't care about the DME distance. We don't care about a time. We care about, we get to 751 feet. If we don't see the airport, we're going missed. This approach plate has the M on it for the missed approach point because you can also do the localizer only approach to this runway. And in which case this localizer has DME on it. When you got to 0.2 DME, you would go missed approach. If you didn't have DME, then you would use the time. If you're at 90 knots at 3 minutes and 32 seconds from Zudka intersection, you would go missed approach if you didn't see the runway. And if you're wondering, below 90 knots, that 478, what that is, on a 3-degree glide slope at 90 knots, to stay on that glide slope, you're going to be descending at approximately 478 feet per minute. And this missed approach procedure is a little bit easier. Climb to 2,200 feet, then climbing left turn to 3,000 direct St. Louis VOR and hold. If you haven't reached 3,000 feet by the VOR, continue the climb in the hold. And when doing a missed approach, you'll see the dash line on the approach plate. That isn't your necessary flight track. That's just a general description of what your flight track should look like. If you're flying a Cessna 172, you might be well beyond the dash line towards St. Louis when you get to 2,200 feet. If you're flying a business jet that's light, you might be to 2,200 feet, a half mile from the end of the airport, and you'll turn way before the depicted line that takes you to St. Louis VOR. So here's another approach. It's a precision approach, so our missed approach point is going to be at our decision height. If we were doing this with just the localizer, it would be a non-precision approach, and our missed approach point would be the DME or a time. So one thing you'll notice when doing a missed approach procedure, almost always you climb straight out first. Then you get to an altitude and you turn left or right, sometimes level off, sometimes continue a climb, and then go to a fix and hold. Like in this case, climb to 600 feet, then climbing left turn to 3,000, and then fly outbound on the LAX 046 degree radial to Amtra intersection, which is also identified by the 17.3 DME off of LAX, and hold. So some tips for setting these up. Think about what navigator are you using to do the approach. Do you need to put the missed approach procedure, the nav aid being used? Can it stay in the number 1 nav? Does it need to be on the number 2? Also, read the missed approach instructions. Look at the altitude. Figure out what the top altitude is where your first level off is going to be. Where that first level off is going to be, you're going to want to put that altitude in the altitude selector. So in this case, it says climb to 600 feet, then climbing left turn to 3,000. You're going to put 3,000 in the altitude selector. You're not going to put 600 and then make the turn and then put 3,000 in. Just put in 3,000. When you hit 600, do the next thing. And in this video, I'm going to demonstrate the missed approach procedures, how to set them up, the procedures once you go missed, what you do as far as flaps up, gear up, then more flaps up, and then climb. One thing I'm not going to really get into is the holding procedure itself. I've got a video, it's about 22 minutes long, on how to do holds that will answer all the questions you have about holds and how to do them and time and what you have to report. But wait for the end to go to that, because I'm going to demonstrate 2 missed approach procedures. I will put a link to that video in the description, and I will try to stick a card somewhere in the video where I'm talking about this right now. So you can just click up in the right corner and go right to it. There's 2 things I want to talk about on this approach plate. One is, when do we go missed? Well, besides the things we already said, time or DME or decision height, another time we would go missed is if we get full scale deflection. So if we're doing the ILS approach in this case, and the localizer needle goes full scale left or right, at that point we would execute a missed approach. If you also go full scale deflection on a glide slope, if it goes all the way to the top or to the bottom against the edge, you would go missed approach, because if you're beyond that, you have no course guidance. You really don't know where you're at. And an example of that is right here, this tower on short vinyl in Teterboro. That right there is a tall tower, and if you're right of course, you'll be very close to that tower. It does not show up on Flight Sim 2020, but in real life, that is a big tower. You look at it doing the approach and you think, man, I hope nobody gets over there. They're going to hit that thing. It's that close. The other thing I want to bring up on this, look at exam. That waypoint is a GPS waypoint. We cannot identify that with traditional nav aids. The default airplanes cannot do this hold the way it is depicted. However, you would be able to put in exam intersection, go direct to it, but you have no way to put in the 132 degree inbound course to fly that hold. So as of right now, you could not do a missed approach procedure and go to that point and hold with the default airplanes. Hopefully at some time in the future they change that and we will be able to. Here we're doing a non-precision approach, the NDB runway 25 into Akron Fulton. So here we are at our minimum descent altitude on the NDB runway 25. We're using the ADF needle for course guidance, so that frees up nav 1. So we can put nav 1, put Briggs VOR 112.4, and we can spin the 322 degree radial. So now when we go miss, when we get to 2 minutes 28 seconds, all we have to do is climb, take out flaps, positive rate gear up, last notch of flaps, climbed our missed approach altitude, and then just hold that heading until we hit the course of 322 degrees, and then follow it until we hit our DME. So we started our timer over the locator outer marker. That was identified by when the needle flipped. When the needle flipped, I started the timer, and we're going for 2 minutes and 28 seconds, and I'm trying to hold 90 knots indicated airspeed during the approach. If we have a headwind or a tailwind and our ground speed changes, we need to look at the chart and adjust our time, not our speed. So then we've hit our 2 minutes and 28 seconds. We execute the missed approach. The other thing with an approach of this type with a non-precision, we have the MDA 1700 feet set in, so we can't set our missed approach altitude until after we hit the missed approach point. First thing I've done is turn the autopilot off, pitch the airplane up to 7-8 degrees. There it goes. And then once that's happened, I've got the airplane climbing, retract flaps, positive rate gear up, and then retract the final notch of flaps. And then when I have time, I've set in 3,100 feet, and we're climbing to that, and then get the autopilot turned on. And one thing I did when I was doing this, I made a mistake. I thought about taking it out and fixing it, but I decided, nope, I'm going to leave it in. So comment below and see if you can tell me what the mistake was that I just made and am currently making. And I'll give you about 15 seconds before I fast forward the video to the next part of the missed approach procedure. So in this procedure, the next thing we're looking for now is the needle to come in so we can intercept and fly outbound on the 322 degree radial off of Briggs VOR. And right there, the needle's starting to center, we can press nav. And once nav is engaged, we see VOR on the flight mode annunciator. The airplane's making a right turn. It's going to intercept and fly the 322 degree radial. Then the next thing we need to look for is the 21.2 DME. And we're currently at 15.5. One thing I want to point out on the Navigraph chart, you'll see up here the inset where the hold is, it says not to scale. There are no coordinates or lat longs inside that inset. Whenever you see that, the airplane diagram will not show up inside those insets. And in the jet aircraft I fly, we use JEP charts just like these. They have that not to scale in those because these are at the identical charts, and the airplane doesn't show up in there either. You have to have the lat longs along the side and the bottom like you see here in order for that to show up. So I'm going to fast forward this a little bit. We're going to get to 21.2 DME, and then we'll make the first initial turn in the hold, and I'll show you a different chart for that, see what that actually looks like. Unfortunately, Ritz intersection is on the low altitude and route chart, so I've pulled that up here almost right there. You can see Ritz intersection, and that's actually depicted. It's identical to the hold that's on the approach plate. You can see 322 is listed as our inbound course. We're now crossing that fixed. We're making a left turn to our outbound heading for the outbound leg. But that's all we're going to cover is on the hold. If you want more information on holds and how to do them, you can look at my video on holding procedures and holding entries. And here's the last procedure that we're going to do. This is the ILS to runway 6 left at LAX. And this is a precision approach. So the precision approach, the missed approach point, is our decision height, which is 369 feet. So when we see 369 feet on the altimeter, we don't see the runway, we go missed. So the next question is, in Nav1, we're going to have the localizer tuned. But the point we're going to hold over is off of LAX VOR. And this procedure says climb to 600 feet, then climbing left turn to 3000 outbound on the LAX 046 degree radial. So the climb to 600 feet, what do we do there? The previous approach, it gave us a heading. This one does not. So for this missed approach procedure, nav1 is going to be left alone. We're going to fly outbound on that 071 final approach course. And then once we reach 600 feet, we're going to make a climbing left turn to 3,000 feet and intercept that radial. And you can see where LAX is, and you can see where the radial's at. If you turn to the left too much, you're never going to intercept it. So it's going to be a very small turn. You could turn 1 degree to the left if you wanted. That's still a climbing left turn to intercept. So to set this up, 108.5 is going to be in nav 1. After we go missed, we're going to climb to 600 feet. We're going to stay on the localizer. And in nav 2, we're going to enter 113.6, which is LAX VOR. And on course 2, we're going to spin in the 046 degree radial to identify AMTRA intersection. We'll also need to pull up DME when we get to 17.3. That's AMTRA intersection on that radial. And right now I've switched off of nav 1. Right there I've gone over to nav 2, and I'm spinning the 046 course into nav 2. So that way when we go miss, we start the climb. All we have to do when we make that turn after 600 feet, we just switch the nav source to nav 2, and it's already set up ready to go. And you can see I'm doing this on the final approach course. This is not when you would do that. You would do this before you even get vectored on the final. You would do this when you're 10 minutes out or so. Here's another situation. What if ATC tells you to go missed and you're not to the missed approach point yet? What do you do? And the answer is continue on the course you're on the final approach course, but you may climb. You can follow the climb instructions. So this one takes us up to 3,000 feet. You can go ahead and climb to 3,000 feet. And once you pass the 0.5 DME, which is the missed approach point now, then you may make a left turn to intercept the outbound course. So previously, the missed approach point would be the decision height, but if we go missed early, we won't have that altitude that we would hit to tell us when we're at that point. So then the next best thing is the 0.5 DME distance to identify the missed approach point. But since we're doing this the conventional way, taking it down to minimums to 369 feet, the next thing we're looking for is 369. Once we hit that, we're going to pretend we don't see that runway, and we're going to go missed approach. And when you go missed approach, in this or in real life when I've done it, the biggest piece of advice I have is don't hurry. Know what you're going to do it, take your time. So we've gone missed, we've pitched up to about 8 degrees, flaps are in takeoff, positive rate, gears up. And now we're staying on the final approach course until we reach 600 feet. And as you can see, we've passed 600 feet. We're now going to make a left turn to 3,000 and intercept the 046 degree radial off of the LAX VOR. So the final approach course is 071. I've actually turned right now as I read this is 068. So it is a left turn to intercept. It's just not a big turn. And I've already done it, but to explain it, we would go down and hit active nav until we get to VOR2. And we see VOR2 on the HSI. And then we can press nav. And I've waited to press nav until the needle starts to move. When we press nav on the flight director control panel, we see VOR on the flight mode annunciator. And all we're doing now as we pass through 1,800 feet is climbing up to 3,000 and flying the course until we hit AMTRA intersection at 17.3 DME. So some tips I have when doing missed approach procedures. If you're doing a precision approach, your missed approach point is your decision height. If you're doing a non-precision approach, which is a localizer, a VOR, NDB approach, your missed approach point is going to be a DME distance or a time. Next, know what altitude you're going to climb to. If you're doing a precision approach, once you've intercepted the glide slope, you can set the missed approach altitude. If you're doing a non-precision approach, you're going to have the MDA set in, or the next altitude above it to the nearest 100. Then, once you hit the missed approach point and get established in a climb and get the autopilot turned on and the airplane cleaned up, then set in the missed approach altitude. And hopefully you get that done before you hit it. If not, you would have to level the airplane off manually and then set it. Next, know when you're going to turn. Are you going to turn when you hit an altitude, or are you going to turn when you hit a course, like a VOR radial? And after that, you should be going to a fix and holding. And on the way there, do you need to adjust your speed? And also, what type of entry are you going to use, and what heading are you going to turn to as soon as you hit the fix? So overall, missed approaches aren't hard. They're just something you don't do a lot. But when you do have to do one, you are extremely busy. There's a lot of stuff going on in a short amount of time. And believe it or not, in the real world, when we go to recurrent training, that's one thing we practice a lot. So good luck doing missed approaches in Flight Sim 2020. They're not that bad. It just takes a little bit of practice. And I hope this video gives everybody a little bit better of an idea of when to go missed, what to do, and how to do them. So thank you for watching. As always, if you have questions, feel free to ask. Leave a comment in the comments section. You can find my email in the About page of the YouTube channel. And also, hit that subscribe button. Thanks.